Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and also to those who are celebrating tonight, Hag Sameach. You have friends everywhere. And so it was recently brought to my attention that on October 20th of this year, Adam Driver revealed that he had been working on a film project titled The Hunt for Ben Solo. He spent more than 2 years apparently working on a script and a concept that would further develop his sequel character with filmmaker Steven Soderbergh. I know normally we don't really talk about Star Wars news. That's probably why I'm a little bit late to the party, but I do have some things I want to say about this. First, out of all the new sequel characters, Kylo Ren's backstory is probably the one that needs the most exploration. The sequels were Rey's story, and that's pretty much been told. Poe and Finn, they're both really fun characters. I think actually Finn's backstory as an ex-First Order Stormtrooper is really fascinating, and Disney really missed an opportunity by not further developing him as a character. You know, leaving the First Order to join the Resistance is not like leaving the Empire to join the Rebellion. It's a far more drastic and extreme action, in my opinion. And if you don't do Finn's backstory, well, his chemistry with Poe in the first movie is terrific, and I would love to see, again, a buddy action movie with these two guys doing some like side quests for the Resistance. Doesn't have to be serious, it just has to be fun. Although Oscar Isaac did announce recently that he doesn't want to have anything to do with Disney. And so yeah, everyone across the political spectrum now has a problem with the Mouse House. I guess the world is healing. Anyway, before we continue, the holidays are right around the corner, and New Year's is right after that. And you know, one of the best commitments you can make to your family and to your friends is by taking care of your own health. And there's no better way to do that than scheduling a yearly physical using our sponsor for today's video, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. Whether you're looking for dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or one of the other 200 specialties offered on ZocDoc, you can easily search by specialty or symptom to build the care team that's right for you. ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers over all 50 states. I've actually used ZocDoc many times over the years to find specialists in my area. I really appreciate the ratings and reviews that help me choose the right provider and be prepared for what kind of doctor visit I'm going to experience. Little extras like being able to fill in your intake paperwork online does make the entire process a lot smoother. You can browse thousands of verified patient reviews, view real appointment availability, and book your visit instantly with just a few clicks. Plus, ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. And you can even score same-day appointments, and no need to call into the doctor's office. Everything is done online through the app. So stop putting off those doctor appointments and stop waiting, and go to ZocDoc.com/GenerationTech. Also linked in the description to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. Thanks again to ZocDoc for sponsoring us today. Let's get back to the video. So Kylo Ren's character really needs more exploration because it comes off in the films as a very extreme and whiny character, and his emotional outbursts just seem undeserved or out of place unless you're, playing COD online against a bunch of teenagers. And it really is a shame, I think, because first, Adam Driver's an amazing actor, perfect for the dark and foreboding character he's meant to portray. And there actually is a lot of potential in the character. I think Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, reminds me a lot of Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, his grandfather. They say the likeness and personality skips a generation. There might be a much deeper reason to why Kylo Ren worships Darth Vader. It might not just be a reaction, to people bullying him for being the grandson of Vader. I think he really does relate to him at a more in a more primal way. Like, they have very matching personalities. Unfortunately for Kylo Ren, in his trilogy, we don't see much of his backstory aside from those flashbacks of him at the New Jedi Order Temple when his uncle/father, Luke Skywalker, tries to murder him in his sleep. That moment adds more depth and motivation to Kylo Ren's character and his actions, but kind of makes Luke Skywalker seem like an unhinged, scared old man, which just seems out of character because this is the same guy who refused to cut his dad down while dueling him on the second Death Star when the stakes were far higher. And he was a younger and more emotional man with less Jedi experience. I mean, watching Luke look over Ben Solo and then draw a lightsaber is a powerful moment, and the sequels delivers a lot of great powerful moments. The death of Han Solo, the destruction of Hazian Prime, the arrival of the Resistance fleet at the 11th hour on Exegol. But all of these individual moments lack the impact they should have because we don't understand the backstory or the stakes of these situations, really. We didn't see Lando rush around the galaxy helping refugees, picking up pieces of worlds broken by the First Order. We don't understand that this fleet is not made up of like regular military guys or even rebels. These are probably just like civilians who have attached a blaster onto their ship and they're rushing headfirst into a suicide mission. And
That's impressive. That's what I want to see. That's what makes the audience excited about the resistance. The ordinary people are standing up against tyranny. We get none of that. We also don't get to see old graybeards like Wedge Antilles begrudgingly return to the battlefield, and they also kill their boy Nien Nunb without any fanfare. It's almost as bad as when they just yeeted Akbar through that window. Yes, I know elite level storytelling does not need like prequels and sequels and an animated cartoon to kind of like fully flesh out the characters so that everything makes sense. But this is Star Wars, and in my opinion, that's how the prequels were saved. And let's be honest, Star Wars has always been more about the vibe of the universe than the actual dialogue and storytelling. I mean, heck, I say it all the time. George Lucas was not great at directing actors. He wasn't great at writing dialogue. I mean, the best Star Wars content, whether it's Empire Strikes Back or Andor, were actually not directed by him. George Lucas is a visionary. I mean, he did fantastic things with world building. He's also very interested in pushing cinema technology and visual effects. He's very much a pioneer in that field. But Star Wars owes its success not just to him. I mean, he definitely kicked it off, but there are like legions of creators and directors who have all added their own touch to this beautiful universe. And what makes Star Wars so strong is the reliance, I think, on the setting rather than the characters. When Irvin Kershner stepped in to direct Empire, Lucas purposely chose him because he was strong-minded enough to challenge him. I think George Lucas understood his own limitations even at a pretty early age. I mean, he's a pretty rational guy in a lot of ways. And it was a good decision for him to choose Kershner for the role because Kershner took Star Wars the myth and made it a far more grounded and relatable experience. Empire Strikes Back was far less black and white than, A New Hope. And instead of just action, pulpy dialogue, now what we had was drama and much slower dialogue scenes with weight and consequences, dramatic reveals. For the first time, we had a closer look at Darth Vader, not as just the machine and enforcer, but as a deeply conflicted father of Luke Skywalker. And Luke is no longer just some all-American kid hero who saves the day without thinking about the consequences. He undergoes his own trials and tribulations. He awakens to the reality of his own limitations. And instead of succeeding this time, his impulsiveness almost gets him killed. But at the same time, that impulsiveness, that care he has for his friends that goes against the Jedi Order, that's what makes Luke better than the old Jedi Order. I think guys like Irvin Kershner are more rare today. I think a lot of directors are driven by ego and self-promotion. So like having a guy like him come in and respect the source material but then just like build on the source material, make the themes more complex, the characters more grounded in reality, that takes a certain level of skill and also ego death that I hope we see more in Star Wars, I feel like today you either have guys like Filoni who really treat the lore like it's a holy scripture and then don't really take risks, or you have guys like Rian Johnson who are talented but utterly unconcerned about how his part 2 fits into a wider trilogy. And actually Tony Gilroy, when he came to the Star Wars trilogy, he came with a lot of honesty. I think everything he does, from writing his scripts and characters to how he communicated with the fans, was very honest. He simply told us, I'm not a Star Wars fan. Deal with it. And I really love this about him. Like, I hate all of these cringy interviews that Disney puts out with like Star Wars directors and actors saying, oh, I love Star Wars since I was a kid. This was my favorite action figure. First of all, I feel like half of those people are lying. And two, I don't care. That doesn't make you better at doing your job. I want to see a good movie. I don't care if you know all the characters' names and fan stuff, And so when Tony Gilroy started making Andor, instead of focusing on the lore, being worried about what the fans wanted or didn't want, he had the experience and backing from the studio to just focus on the truth he found in the characters on screen in the world that he was trying to fit himself in. Tony Gilroy drew from history. He looked at historical figures. He treated the entire project as if he were an investigative journalist trying to understand the motivations of a mad revolution. In my opinion, Tony Gilroy, despite not being a fan, showed more respect for the Star Wars IP than most creators who claim to be fans. Because from day one, Tony Gilroy treated the universe as if it were real. He treated his story with journalistic integrity. He wanted to find the truth. He took the time to logically connect characters with their actions and backgrounds instead of just relying on member berries and cheap nostalgia and cool action poses. I mean, you should be pissed when a director brings back an old legacy character out of the blue for like no reason. They're not respecting you there. They're not saying to themselves, I need to make something good to actually entertain this person. It's more like, oh, I'm going to trick this person to liking this because I'm going to tap into his nostalgia. You should feel insulted when a director does that to you. And as Star Wars fans, as people who yearn to see this galaxy far, far away, I think we noticed what Gilroy was doing and how realistic he was trying to make this universe And I think we appreciated him for that. I, for one, didn't even realize that Star Wars could reach that level of, cinema and storytelling. For me, Star Wars has always been separate from traditional cinema. It's more like an interactive universe than it is just plain movies. So here's the thing, when you're a media company, especially one like Disney, which is really just focused on capturing your heart when you're a child, algorithms and marketing can only go so far to convince a kid to watch your film. But having a parent introduce a franchise to their children, and perhaps even more importantly, watching and enjoying that franchise alongside their child, creates a mythology and love for an IP that is related to familial love, to togetherness, and that is so freaking powerful. I mean, it almost feels cheap talking about this connection in like marketing terms, right? And shows like Andor or movies like The Empire Strikes Back, that's for the portion of the audience that is a little bit older, the parents. They are the gatekeepers for the next generation. They're the ones who decide if their kids are just gonna be watching Skibbity Toilet and Minecraft streams all day, or something a little more, well put together like The Bad Batch or The Skeleton Crew. And with the cancellation of The Hunt for Ben Solo, I think we're missing an opportunity here to really add some more seriousness and weight to the sequel trilogy films. Now, I personally think a prequel that shows the ordeal of Ben Solo growing up with the legacy of his parents and influence of the dark side would work better at humanizing Kylo Ren. But that's not exactly what The Hunt for Ben Solo is. It is more of a kind of post-Rise of Skywalker kind of story. It is kind of a sequel, right? This is really a redemption arc of some kind for Ben Solo, and I believe he's supposed to come back alive, or at least we get to interact with them in some more meaningful way. Maybe he's a Force spirit. In this kind of story, there still can be flashbacks to his childhood so that we can see, like, where Ben Solo comes from and, his ordeal as a child, which I think are important in explaining his motivations, which again are kind of strange in the sequels. But here's the thing, not only is Adam Driver coming back for this movie, it would have been directed by Steven Soderbergh, and that is a huge freaking deal. I think after watching Andor, we realize how important it is to have a true director and auteur who can handle this massive, grand, epic universe. And Steven Soderbergh, in my opinion, he is at that level. He's different from Tony Gilroy, but he has the capability to deliver something that I think is just as meaningful. Steven Soderbergh is a prolific director who is known for his more experimental approach to films. He's created movies like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Traffic, Contagion, and Logan Lucky, which is probably where he runs into Adam Driver for the first time. Cauliflower. Steven Soderbergh, in many ways, could have done for the sequels what Tony Gilroy did for Rogue One, turn a cinematically exciting and action-heavy story into something far more meaningful. Now, Soderbergh doesn't have the same type of bold and operatic characters that Tony Gilroy has, right? I mean, some of his characters are just straight up Shakespearean, and they deliver these epic monologues. You're not going to see that in a Soderbergh movie, and that might work better with Kylo Ren. Where Tony and Steven are the same is that, like many creatives, they are obsessed with systems that control and run society, and a lot of their work are criticisms of these systems, although they, again, approach this from a very different way. In Andor and in movies like Michael Clayton, we look at broken people constantly grinding against the system, constantly compromising in order to survive until they finally hit a breaking point where they no longer can take it anymore and fight back and start to rely on their principles rather than their role within the system. To Tony Gilroy, themes are immensely important. Therefore, we have a lot of complex dialogue and amazing monologues that lead to just these epic moments with huge moral consequences. For Soderbergh, morality is far more ambiguous. It's much more subtle, and he wants the viewer to think and look for it himself. Some people have said that his narrative style is almost bordering detachment, which creates these absurdly blunt and realistic moments, like when Matt Damon's wife dies of a mysterious illness in the movie Contagion.
Despite all her efforts, she failed to respond. Okay. And her heart stopped. Unfortunately, she did die. I'm sorry, Mr. Hamill.
I know this is hard to accept.
Okay. Can I go talk to her?
See, this seems like an absurd moment. It might even seem like slightly funny, I don't know. But if you ever actually been in this situation and had to receive news about a loved one in a hospital, you'll know that this is unfortunately how it's done. It's just a weird and awkward moment, and no amount of hospital training or no amount of preparation on your behalf is going to make this moment less awkward. Now, that person who died might have been your whole entire world, a mother, a father, a wife, or a daughter, but to the hospital staff, it's just another day. It's not even a failure to them, but part of doing business. If you feel too much in that line of work, forget about it. You're not going to last. I mean, this is why doctors have yeah, some of the craziest senses of humor that I've ever seen. So what is Soderbergh trying to do with this scene? Well, I think it's a criticism of the modern hospital system that is supposed to care for people's health, but in reality, it doesn't even treat individuals like humans with any compassion at all. If Tony Gilroy were to deliver that same message, he would probably have his main character, I don't know, blow up the hospital, but before he does it, goes onto the intercom and has this epic speech about like, you know, how horrible the hospital system is. I don't know. Soderbergh, on the other hand, just wants you to watch Matt Damon sit there and cry once the full weight of his wife's death hits him in the gut, right before he faces the reality that his son also died and that now he's a single father and has to take care of his daughter in the middle of this global pandemic that is terrifying. For Soderbergh, the more extreme and dramatic the situation is on screen, the more muted the performance is. And that's because, in truth, most people, most ordinary people, do not deal with this type of trauma on a daily basis. And so there are no operatic moments that sensationalize or glorify trauma. Instead, his characters are just exhausted or trying to disassociate from whatever is happening. And these are the more common reactions to trauma that just is not shown as much in films. In the movie Traffic, there's an entire sequence where the Mexican police officer Javier is captured by cartel members. His partner Manolo had contacted DEA and was trying to sell information to them. And so these cartel guys were trying to kill them. And so Manolo is kind of just blabbering on about how he wants his wife to remember him as a hero and how he wants the cartel guys to tell his wife that he did something heroic before he died. Meanwhile, Javier, played by the amazing Benicio del Toro, remains cold. Not a word is spoken at all from him. He just observes the scene silently. And that's because Soderbergh wants you to pay really close attention to how he looks and how he's acting, and not what he says, but what he doesn't say. Because later on, the cartel agrees to let Javier go because he hasn't said anything. He hasn't really shown whether he is with Manolo and his scheme to betray the cartel. They didn't see Benicio's face in the back of the car because they were facing forwards, but there are very subtle glances that he made to his partner. There's also the lifting of his chin in one scene as if he's trying to contain, I don't know, tears pooling in his eyes. It's all extremely subtle. And again, Benicio del Toro, very skillful actor. He's able to kind of portray these emotions that you only catch a scent of. You don't really understand what's fully going on. But by the end of the movie, Javier does kind of turn in as an informant, and he basically testifies about all the corruption in the Mexican police and the army with the cartels. And it's at that moment, and only at that moment, his true intentions are revealed. So just like we had no idea whether the cartel would execute him or not, it's very hard to read Javier for most of the film. He is morally opaque, and he has to be, because he's working as a federale. Both Gilroy and Soderbergh are masters at displaying systems. Gilroy wants you, the audience, to judge the system and resist. He gives you instructions, and the motivations are provided as well. Soderbergh wants his audience to observe the system and just understand how they work. I'm sure he likes heroes too, but he doesn't want you to detect his guiding hand at all. He wants you to come to your own conclusions. And again, because both of these individuals are meticulous in their preparation and research of the roles and the professions they're trying to explore, I think they would do justice to Star Wars. Well, I know Tony Gilroy already did, but yeah, I think Steven Soderbergh would do an amazing job with the IP. Soderbergh also really loves experimenting with form, and not like how Christopher Nolan just beats the non-linear structure thing to death. Soderbergh's experiments with form, I think, are much more natural, and they are tailored for each story he tells, and sometimes it's very subtle stuff, but it always adds to the film rather than detracting from it, like freaking Dunkirk. Like, why did that have to be a disjointed narrative? So in the movie Traffic, Soderbergh uses color grading to differentiate the different storylines. Mexico is yellow, DC is blue and cold, San Diego is more of a neutral looking grade. This is a really cool non-verbal and non-expository way to help the audience know which storyline they're looking at, and more importantly, the moral and power dynamics between these groups. Soderbergh is a true auteur, and he also is his own editor and cinematographer on a lot of films. He actually lists himself as pseudonym, so you don't actually see his name at every step of the credits, but that's a special thing, I think. And I think because the hunt for Ben Solo is dealing with essentially a forced spirit, an individual who has already died, that gives Soderbergh the ability to get really weird and innovative with how the narrative and form is shaped. Actually, Adam Driver recalled that the script for the show was one of the coolest he'd ever read, and I wonder if that has something to do with the form of how the story is being told. I also read that this story is somewhat inspired by Empire Strikes Back. I don't know if that means just the tone or the themes explored or something like that. So how would Soderbergh approach the hunt for Ben Solo? Well, I think he'd really focus on systems again, and the best system he can take a look at is, I guess, the Empire, the First Order, right? I can see Soderbergh really trying to explore the machine nature of this authoritarian government through visual exploration and also the actions of the people on screen. Remember, Soderbergh doesn't do big monologues or even like dialogue that is very in your face and expository. Instead, he's all about character action. And so the corruption of Ben Solo by Snoke should be portrayed as something quite incremental and natural. Ben is taken away from his parents and given to his uncle. Maybe Snoke brings him a cool trinket to remind him of home. Ben faces scrutiny for being the son of Darth Vader. He's made fun of. Maybe he lashes out at other students. But it has to be subtle, as is Master Luke's reaction to him. And when Ben Solo is at his lowest point, at his most isolated, maybe that's when Snoke gifts him something of his grandfather to further push him into the right direction. The way Soderbergh tells the story is that he'll hide all the emotions, all the reveals in between the lines. Sometimes it's very subtle moments that you yourself have to figure out, and it becomes a pretty rewarding process when you do see them. In a Soderbergh-style film, Kylo Ren's fall will be sad, but underwhelming and inevitable. We'll see it from a mile away, and we can't really do anything to stop it. The individual is helpless in the face of so much adversity. And the devastation Kylo Ren wrought as the leader of the First Order, well, it will be violent and personal, chaotic, probably a lot of handheld footage, followed by some shaky and disoriented shots of young Ben crying after his first horrific massacre. Yeah, I think Steven Soderbergh would be the perfect person to tell the redemption story of Kylo Ren. Because Soderbergh wouldn't make it a big moment. Even his redemption would be underplayed and open to interpretation. Instead of leaving the theater understanding Kylo Ren's impact to the galaxy, I think audiences will leave understanding how the galaxy impacted Kylo. It'll be a story about failed mentorship, about failed parenting, about what happens to young boys when they're not properly raised or given the support and love they need, and how systems driven by fear and hatred oftentimes target vulnerable youth like him. And most importantly, Kylo Ren's redemption in this story doesn't come from Soderbergh telling you that he's being redeemed. It comes from you deciding on your own after watching his actions and discovering what the entire picture actually really means. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed my analysis here. Unfortunately, it seems like this movie will never see the light of day, but who knows? Maybe one day down the road, when there's an appetite for such things, we'll see a return to this. But in general, I do think it's important to attach really talented directors with experience, with experience in managing these very large projects, because making a movie is like starting a miniature company. And oftentimes when you don't have that complete picture, the creativity, the management skills, and also the vision, you just can't make anything meaningful. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, the democracy. I'll see you next time.